Ever look at a jagged skyline of stone and wonder how those walls kept entire armies at bay for months, sometimes years? Medieval castles weren't oversized mansions with a nice view. They were purpose-built war machines with kitchens and chapels tucked inside. Their secret wasn't only brute strength, it was placement, planning, and an almost petty level of attention to terrain. Before the first block was lifted, the builders asked the most important question of the entire project. Where do we put this thing? The best answer was almost always above you. High ground was the first and most reliable advantage. Hills, cliffs, and volcanic crags were the medieval version of a cheat code. Put your fortress on a steep rise, and you force attackers to battle gravity before they ever touch the wall. That meant huffing and sweating in heavy armor, dragging siege ladders and rams uphill while defenders had both the view and the angle. Edinburgh Castle is a classic example perched on a hard plug of volcanic rock. Marching up to it already felt like losing a warm-up round. By the time a besieging force trudged to the top, they were winded, disorganized, and trying to fight on a staircase nature built. Water came next, and it pulled double duty. Plant a castle on a peninsula or an island, and you get instant walls on 2 or 3 sides. Moats took that idea and turned it into a full-time security guard. Places like Bodiam Castle wrapped their cores in broad, gleaming water pretty from a distance, brutal up close. Water doesn't just drown soldiers, it blocks towers and rams, makes ladders awkward, and laughs at tunneling. Even when the moat wasn't ocean deep, it forced attackers into building bridges or filling sections under fire slow, messy, demoralizing work. But even without water, the approach to a stronghold was designed to be a headache. Long, narrow causeways funneled armies into single file. Switchback paths teased momentum and then stole it with every turn. You might see one obvious road in and assume that was your shot, only to discover it was placed for maximum exposure to arrows and stones from 3 angles. The best sites erased whole attack lanes altogether. Sheer drops on one side, marsh on another, forest you can't wheel a tower through on a third. The message to would-be conquerors was simple. You'll fight where we tell you to, not where you want. Weather joined the defense team too. Winter gales punished exposed ridgelines. Spring rains turned clay tracks into boot, sucking misery. If you've ever tried to push a heavy cart through 6 inches of mud, imagine doing it under a storm of quarrels while your commander yells about honor. Limestone cliffs got slick in constant drizzle. Frozen ground shattered under hooves and wheels. A siege didn't have to be an epic clash to end. Sometimes the climate just decided it for you. And the psychology of terrain? That's the part we tend to forget. After slogging for days across unreliable roads, an army would finally crest a hill and see a fortress clinging to an impossible crag or floating on a ring of reflective water. Sometimes that view alone cracked morale. Chroniclers quietly record sieges that fizzled before the first ladder went up, not because the garrison fought a pitched battle, but because the attackers couldn't square the cost of attacking the landscape itself. Castle planners didn't leave the setting entirely to chance. They curated it. Woods were kept in specific arcs to block enemy engines and cloak friendly sorties. Lines of sight were cleared in precise cones, so anyone approaching would be silhouetted against open ground. In some places, lords reshaped ponds, redirected streams, and leveled low-rises to deny cover. Think of the site like a giant theatre set. Every tree, ditch, and bend was placed to make the attackers miss their mark. All of this, the altitude, the water, the geometry of the approach, the choreographed environment, was only the lobby of the medieval security system. If an enemy actually made it to the stone, they were already tired, muddy, and a little spooked. That's exactly how the designers wanted them. Slowed down, stretched out, and easy to read. Because once you're at the wall, you're not at safety. You're at phase 2. Let's talk scale for a second, because modern eyes have trouble with it. The outer skin of a proper castle wasn't thick the way we describe thick doors. We're talking park a compact car inside the cross-section thick. Many curtain walls ran upward of 20 feet across at their base. Some edges flared outward into low stone slopes, taluses that forced battering ram blows to glance upward instead of punching straight in. Those same slopes made ladders wobbly and sappers miserable. A step back reveals a quiet lesson. Even the wall's shape was a weapon. That shape began with a simple but ingenious build method. Instead of a single block of solid stone, masons erected 2 dressed faces and packed the in-between with smaller stones and mortar rubble core. That created a wall that wasn't just strong, it was forgiving. It moved a little under impact, dispersing the force of a ram or a dropped boulder without splitting like a brittle slab. If a section cracked, the damage tended to localize rather than ripple catastrophically. Medieval builders didn't have rebar or seismic codes, but they had centuries of painful lessons and a kind of practical physics you learn the hard way. Then there were the layers, concentric defenses, nested rings of walls and yards. Breach the outer curtain, and congratulations, you've entered the least fun courtyard in history. Tower tops loom over you, archers can fire inward from a higher ring, and suddenly the line that looked like victory turns into a meat grinder called a killing zone. Between rock and rock, you are the softest thing. The concept is brutally simple. Every success an attacker has is supposed to trap them closer to something worse. Even the quiet parts of the wall had ears. Builders sometimes filled specific stretches above likely tunneling zones with loose pebbles and poorly bound rubble, so that any underground scratching set off a gritty rain and a telltale hiss. No batteries, no bells. Just gravity and a guard who knows to listen. By the time you stand in the shadow of that stone, the site has already done more damage to your plan than the garrison has. And that's the point. Castles weren't designed to win a fair fight. They were designed to force unfair ones, uphill, across water, along gauntlets, in bad weather, under bad angles, in spaces where the defenders pick the rules and the pace. The moment you commit to the approach, you're in their story. But the cleverness didn't stop with the ground or the contour of the walls. The most tempting feature, the gate, was the most devious. It looked like a door. It acted like a trap. And if you charged it, you discovered that the shortest path into a medieval fortress was also the longest day of your life. So you've crawled uphill, skidded through mud, dodged a moat, and finally touched stone. Congratulations, you've just met the least welcoming handshake in medieval Europe, the curtain wall. From the ground, it reads as one big slab of rock. From the builder's point of view, it's a layered machine designed to bully physics. Start with scale. A proper medieval wall wasn't thick in the way we talk about chunky countertops. It was call your friend to help you walk from one side to the other. Thick, often 20 feet at the base, tapering a bit as it rose. That bulk wasn't medieval ego, it was energy management. Every blow from a ram, every thunk of a trebuchet stone contains force, looking for somewhere to go. Builders gave it a long, hungry path through rubble, mortar, and air pockets bleeding off the punch before it could become a crack that spelled disaster. That's where the sandwich method shines. Masons raised two dressed faces, nice, tight stonework. You could run a palm across, and between them they dumped smaller rock, broken shards, lime mortar, and anything else that locked together like granola pressed into a bar. We call it a rubble core, but don't picture chaos. It was deliberate roughness. Under impact, a monolithic block wants to split. A layered core shrugs and sips the hit, passing it sideways and downward through a million tiny seams. If a single stone face spalled or chipped, the damage usually stopped at the core. The wall didn't fail. It flexed just enough to keep standing. Look lower, and the geometry gets mean. Many castles flared at the base into a low, outward slanting slope called a talus. If you're swinging a ram, that slope is a confidence killer. Instead of letting you hit square and hard, it tilts the force upward, bleeding momentum and turning clean impacts into glancing kisses. Ladders on a talus? They shimmy, bounce, and do their best impression of a carnival ride. Sappers trying to scrape away the bottom courses now find themselves chipping at angles, with rocks skittering down toward their boots. The talus is the wall saying, by all means, try, just not effectively. Height matters too, but not just as a flex. Taller walls protect the interior from arching projectiles and let defenders fire downward at vicious angles. Importantly, the wall top isn't a decorative crown. It's a workplace. Parapets run along it. Crenellations, the iconic up-down tooth pattern, turn the skyline into a rhythm of cover and fire. Merlons, the raised blocks, are your shield. Embrasures, the gaps, are your gun ports. You duck, you step, you shoot, you duck again, all while standing on a wall walk wide enough for two armored people to pass without anyone doing the medieval version of the awkward hallway shuffle. Now multiply the problem for attackers. Concentric design. The smartest fortresses, nested defenses like a set of granite matryoshka dolls. Breach the outer curtain, and you're not in. You're in a bowl. A higher inner wall looms, and suddenly you're being shot from behind, from the sides, and from that second ring ahead. The yard between walls, sometimes called the zwinger, wasn't landscaped for picnics. It was calibrated for panic. Narrow enough to trap you, open enough that you couldn't hide, overlooked from 270 degrees of arrows, stones, and sarcasm. Even the silent war got attention. Tunneling sapping was a real threat. Attackers would burrow under a wall, prop the cavity with wood, then burn the supports so the ground collapsed. Defenders answered with countermine shafts, but they also prepped sections of wall base with gravelly fills and poorly bound segments that talked when disturbed. Imagine the night watch hearing a subtle rain of grit behind the masonry, or feeling a tremor through the floor stones. No electronics, no sirens. Just a wall that tattled. Material choices pulled weight too. Harder-facing stones on the outside took the weather and the pounding. Inside surfaces sometimes used cheaper, softer rock that was easier to shape for the complex joints around stairwells, postern doors, and arrow loops. Lime mortar cooked, slaked, mixed carefully cured into a stone-like matrix that bonded the whole messy sandwich. In wet climates, builders prioritized dense, water-shedding faces. In hotter zones, the core might be a bit looser to let heat and moisture move rather than crack the shell. Local geology wasn't a constraint so much as a palette. And then there's layout. Straight runs of wall are strong, but a simple straight line produces blind spots. Add towers projecting, rounded if you can, and every flat stretch suddenly sits under flanking fire. Towers at regular intervals, think a longbow shot apart, let defenders lace the ground below with overlapping fields. If you're an attacker hugging the base to avoid arrows from the front, congratulations. The tower at your 9 o'clock just turned your safe lane into a bowling alley. Speaking of towers, the older square style had a nasty habit of creating dead corners where attackers could cluster unseen and pound away. By the 12th century, many builders shifted to round or D-shaped towers. Curves shrugged off impacts, eliminated easy ram targets, and opened the arcs of fire. Picture the difference between punching a wall and punching a barrel. One takes it, one rolls with it. The wall isn't just a barrier, it's a road system. Hidden behind parapets, the wall walk is medieval highway infrastructure. Runners carry orders. Archers shift to the hotspot. Spare stones, darts, and barrels of "we really hope it doesn't come to this" are staged behind merlons. Stairs are narrow and often spiral clockwise as you ascend, a small but brilliant detail that gives a right-handed defender swinging down more room for their sword while cramping the attacker climbing up. Logistics win fights. The wall knows that. All of this structure, shape, and staging conspires toward one goal: never let the enemy choose a fair fight. If they're close enough to swing a ram, they're also close enough to be raked from 3 angles. If they try to dig, the ground whispers. If they try to climb, the slope lies to their ladder. If they break through, the next ring says, "Welcome to level 2, which brings us to the one place attackers had to try, sooner or later the spot every fortress needs and every commander dreads: the gate. Doors are, by definition, weaknesses. Medieval engineers took that reality and turned it into a puzzle box that bites. From the outside, a gatehouse looks like an ornate front porch. From the inside, it's a layered machine built to slow, split, confuse, and punish. Drawbridge, doors, portcullis again. Murder holes above, flanking loops on the sides, a floor that tilts, a corridor that bends. It's not an entrance, it's a test. Because if the wall is the fortress's muscle, the gatehouse is its brain. A narrow place where the entire design thinks very, very fast. If the curtain wall is a castle's clenched fist, the gatehouse is the open palm, open only because it's about to snap shut. Every fortress needs a door for markets, messengers, and the lord's horses to get in and out. That makes the gate the obvious target for every battering ram and hot-headed commander who wants a quick win. Medieval engineers stared that problem in the face and said, "Fine, we'll make the door the worst idea you'll have all year." First contact. The bridge. Most serious gatehouses faced a gap, natural water, a cut ditch, or a purpose. Dug moat, and the only way across was a drawbridge, balanced on counterweights or cranked by chains. From a distance it looks theatrical. Up close, it's a trap switch. When danger loomed, A few turns on a windlass yanked the bridge upright to form a vertical shield, often studded with iron to shrug off fire. Even when lowered, the bridge might rest on stone stops that shattered under a ram's shock, dropping the roadway out from beneath charging troops. Imagine thinking, "We're in," and then discovering gravity vetoed your plan. Pass the bridge, and you meet the first doors. Heavy, iron-banded timber leaves that swing inward. They're not the main event. They're a speed bump. The real muscle drops from above. The portcullis think of a spiked lattice the size of a garage door sliding in grooves. Many gatehouses had two portcullises spaced a short dash apart. If defenders timed it right, they'd let a bold spearhead rush beneath the first grate, then crash it down behind them and slam the inner one in front. Congratulations, you didn't break into the castle. You walked into a box. And that box bites. Look up. The ceiling over that narrow hallway is honeycombed with square or round holes, murder holes. They're exactly what they sound like. From the gallery above, defenders dump stones, sand heated to skillet sizzle, or scalding water. Contrary to legend, oil was too pricey to pour like soup. Most lords saved it for lamps, not intruders. Burning pitch, quicklime dust, and even beehives made appearances. A thick shield over your head helps until someone tips a beam that knocks it from your hands, and a rock the size of your helmet introduces itself to your helmet. The walls of that corridor aren't dead either. Arrow loops those famously skinny slits line both sides. From the outside, each looks like a needle hole. From the inside, they're splayed wide, giving archers a generous fan to aim through while presenting the tiniest target to anyone returning fire. It's "I can see you, you can't see me," engineered in stone. Now squeeze that lane. The passage is intentionally narrow so a ram can't build momentum, cavalry can't charge, and only a few desperate souls can press forward at once. The geometry turns your army into a single file problem, and then the hallway bends. A good gatehouse rarely runs straight. It kinks left or right just enough to break line of sight and kill the rhythm of a charge. Ramming teams need a clear run-up. Turns bully them into awkward angles where the head of the ram scrapes uselessly. Those bends also expose attackers' flanks to more loops and more rocks. It's like a hallway designed by a maze-loving troll who also studied ballistics. Step back and look at the box from the outside. The entire structure usually juts out from the curtain wall, forming a fortified nose. That projection is a three-sided kill zone. Defenders on the curtain can rake the approach with arrows. Defenders on the gatehouse roof can hammer the top with vertical drops. Defenders on flanking towers can stitch the sides with crossfire. If you're the unlucky person operating a ram beneath that overhang, you're hearing arrows thunk into wood, stones cracking on the planks, and your crew yelling 3 different instructions at once. Meanwhile, above you, a calm sergeant is counting. 2 steps more drop now. Controls for the portcullises and bridges sat in secure rooms behind thick doors and grills, often with redundant systems. Chain hoists, counterweight winches, ratchets that prevented accidental drops, and locking pins the size of mallets. In a crunch, defenders could jam a portcullis mid-descent to trap an elite unit in the crush lane. Then take their time making that lane very educational. If attackers used hooks to lift the grate, defenders hammered wedges into the grooves, or simply cut the lifting ropes. Stone doesn't argue, it falls. Of course, the smartest engineers added misdirection. False gates convincing facades without a real entrance lured rams and ladders to the wrong spot, where the wall was extra strong and the angles were extra cruel. Some castles built a picturesque outer door that led only to a pocket yard, overlooked from 3 sides and roofed by murder hole galleries. The moment attackers shouted victory, the inner portcullis dropped, and the sky started throwing boiling surprises. Even if you make it past the gauntlet, you're not in. Many strongholds stacked gatehouses in series outer barbican, main gate, inner gate, each a checkpoint with its own set of tricks. Between them, courtyards shaped to channel movement, studded with knee-high obstacles to trip men at a run, and paved with slick cobbles that turn into ice rinks in rain. All the while, the upper stories of those gate blocks act like self-contained mini-forts, small garrisons with their own stores and water, ready to keep fighting even if the outer yard is compromised. Let's talk numbers and angles for a second, because the math of misery matters. A portcullis weighing several hundred pounds drops fast enough to break bones through mail. A 1-foot wide murder hole doesn't sound large until you realize that from 3 meters up, a 20-pound stone gains enough punch to stove in a shield rim and turn arm bones into opinions. Heat sand to a modest few hundred degrees, and it flows like water into every joint and visor slit. You don't tough it out. You panic, drop gear, and scramble, which is exactly what the design wants. Architects even considered sound. The echoing tunnel amplifies the clatter of chains, the snap of winches, the drumbeat of boots on wood. Attackers can't easily tell where orders are coming from. Defenders can hear precisely when to release. In the midnight confusion of a surprise sortie, a seasoned castellan can run the gatehouse like an instrument, lower, raise, open, close, cutting enemy squads into segments and feeding each segment into a different grinder. And yet, the gatehouse wasn't just a murder machine. On market days, it was a customs booth. On feast days, it was a parade arch. Its guardrooms held ledgers, seals, and spare spearheads. The same slots that spat arrows during war served as polite windows to check travel papers in peace. That dual identity bureaucracy by morning, battlefield by night, meant the mechanisms had to be reliable, maintainable, and fast. Crews rehearsed drills: bridge up, count to 3 clank, outer grate, thud, inner doors, bar slide, pins in. The choreography shaved seconds, and seconds decide whether a raiding party makes it inside or dies on the threshold. Could attackers crack a good gatehouse? Sometimes. Fire and smoke drove out defenders. Covered ramsos shielded crews long enough to chew the doors. Trebuchets might batter the projecting nose until the masonry cracked. But any success at the gate cost blood, time, and nerve, far beyond the neat diagrams in a commander's head. And even a breach wasn't the end. The passage beyond often narrowed again, or funneled into the base of a tower where spiral stairs forced right-handers to fight uphill on the defenders' terms. Survive that, and the inner ward loomed, higher and angrier. The genius of the medieval gatehouse is that it admits the problem a door is weak, and then weaponizes every inch around it. The water before, the drop between, the corridor within, the roof above, the turns beyond. It's not a single trick. It's a stack of small, ruthless inconveniences that compound until courage turns into confusion. And if you finally look up from that cramped, echoing tunnel and glimpse blue sky again, it's only because the defenders let you see it. Beyond the teeth of the gate rises the rest of the castle's advantage. Height used intelligently. Up there, along the parapets and towers, is where gravity becomes a doctrine and simple machines turn into terror. Climb the inner stairs tight, echoing, turning clockwise to favor the home team, and you come out into sky and wind. Up here, the castle stops being an abstract mass and becomes a machine you can feel. The air is cooler, the horizon wider, and gravity is suddenly on your side. Medieval defenders loved height not because it looked noble in a tapestry, but because it turned every ounce they lifted into an enemy's problem on the way down. First lesson: battlements aren't decoration. That toothy skyline crenellations is a rhythm instrument for war. The high blocks are merlons, the gaps embrasures. The pattern lets you play peekaboo with death. Step into the gap, shoot, step behind the block, breathe. It's cover and fire, all day if needed. Behind those teeth runs the wall walk, a stone catwalk, wide enough for armoured bodies, spare bundles of arrows, and a stack of gravity-enhanced negotiations, aka rocks staged within arm's reach. The parapet height? Calculated so a standing archer can loose safely while keeping the vital bits tucked behind stone. The quiver of weapons starts simple. Bows rule the long lanes. A good longbowman can send trouble 200 yards out, turning the approach into a zone where morale leaks away with every thud into wood and mail. Closer in, crossbows take over, slower to reload, sure, but brutally direct. A heavy quarrel is a short, angry conversation with plate. And it's not just about range, it's about angles. From the battlement, a defender can arc arrows over the front line and into the ranks behind, or shoot steeply downwards so shields become hats that don't quite cover enough. Arrow loops add finesse. From the field, they look like harmless slits. From the gallery side, they splay into wide cones of vision. That geometry lets one archer govern a surprising slice of ground without exposing more than a nose and a bow hand. Loops come in all dialects, vertical for bows, cross-shaped to allow a crossbow's horizontal prod. even paired loops to sweep a doorway at two heights. If you're an attacker pressed close to the wall to avoid the parapet above, you're now in the side view of a loop that was placed to punish exactly that impulse. But Stone's favourite language is weight. The simplest drop rock over edge does not negotiate. A 20-pound block released from 40 feet arrives with the mood of a kicking horse. Except it spreads that mood into a shield, the arm behind it, and anyone standing too close. Defenders stack stones by size. Big boys for rams and concentrated knots of men. Paving, stone slabs for ladders, fist-sized cobbles for the moment. A helmet crest appears at the top rung. Timing is everything. The best crews don't hurl blindly. They wait for the ram's lift, the ladder's flex, the commander's hand signal, and then they let gravity sing. Machicolations, those projecting stone balconies with floor openings, turn the wall itself into a vertical firing range. Instead of leaning dangerously over the parapet, you can stand behind solid merlons and simply drop through the holes. Hot water scalds, but hot sand terrifies. It flows. It finds every gap. It keeps burning as it slides under mail and into gloves. Pitch or resin clings and ignites. Quicklime powdered into dust blinds and panics. Fiction loves boiling oil. Reality used cheaper, meaner stuff more often. No one writes ballads about heated grit, but ask the man who tried to rub it out of his eyes while people with spears approached his ladder. Heavy kit lived up here too. Springald's oversized crossbow cousins sat on frames and hurled thick darts that could punch through pavises and keep going into the poor soul behind. Ballista-like engines, smaller than the great field trebuchets, picked off crews at siege machines or swept a gate approach clear for a sortie. Hoardings, the wooden ancestors of balcony extensions, could be bolted onto the wall face in a crisis, giving defenders overhang and more angles to drop from. They were cheap, quick to assemble, and as flammable as a bad idea. Smart crews kept tubs and skins ready to douse fires the moment a flaming arrow thunked in. Towers made the battlements smarter. Projecting out from the curtain, they let you rake the base of the wall flanking fire, so the safe blind zone directly under the parapet turns out to be anything but. Early square towers created corners where attackers could cluster. Later round or D-shaped towers erased those havens and turned incoming stones into glancing blows. Spacing mattered. A good rhythm put towers roughly a longbow cast apart, so their fields overlapped and the ground below became a lattice of kill lanes. If a ladder went up, two towers could talk to each other across it using arrows and bad news. Inside the towers, the fighting platforms and galleries formed a circulatory system for men and munitions. Runners carried bundles of arrows from inner stores to hotspots. Spare stones were staged at waist height, so you could grab and drop without bending in armor. When a section heated up, a horn blast called crew rotations. Fresh arms forward, exhausted back for water and a quick blessing before returning to the line. Good commanders learned to think in weight and time: how many arrows left on this side, how long to drag a new crate up the stair, how fast a springled crew can loose without snapping a cord. Physics did the quiet work. Drop height multiplies energy, slope multiplies chaos. A ladder lets one person climb. It also channels a dozen men's hopes into a narrow strip of rungs where one well-aimed stone can turn ascent into a human slide. A ram needs rhythm. Interrupt the beat with a dropped beam at the wrong moment, and you don't just dent wood, you shred timing and courage. Even sound bends to the defenders. From up here, you can hear the creak of axles, the counting chant of the ram crew, the commander's whistle. You don't guess, you cue off the music of the attack. Weather doesn't sit out the fight. Wind at height carries arrows farther for one side and knocks them awry for the other. Rain slicks the wall walk and makes every ladder rung a gamble. In winter, ice gives defenders sliding lanes for stones. Yes, medieval people greased their physics when they could. In summer, heat bakes men in mail. Defenders rotate to shade while the besiegers stew in their camp. The battlements turn the climate into another ally. If a storm rolls in, launch when thunder hides your cues. If a still night falls, set a silent ambush at the loops and wait for silhouettes. Not everything on the parapet was about killing. Some of it was about telling. Signal flags on poles, horn calls and torch codes moved information along the line faster than a sprinting messenger. A raised red pennon might mean shields up for stones, 2 short horn blasts, portcullis, a common vocabulary drilled into the garrison so that the wall could act like one, not a dozen separate panic points. In a good crew, you could walk the battlement and see the choreography. A springled winding while 2 archers kneel to let the big dart fly overhead. A rock team clearing their lane as a ladder team steps in. A runner ducking behind merlons with a bundle of fresh shafts. War, but tidy. Attackers did adapt. Mantlets, big mobile shields rolled forward to shelter crossbowmen harassing the crest. Pavises locked into little barricades, creating momentary cover while ladders went up. Siege towers tried to meet height with height, bringing their own mini parapets to the wall's level. The answer from the crest: fire, hooks, and leverage. Flaming bolts sought the tower's seams. Hooked poles snagged the top edge to tug it off balance. Quick sorties under a hail of covering arrows rushed out to burn the base, while the men above screamed for someone to bring water faster than physics would allow. Every victory on the battlements is local and compounding. Knock one ladder, and the men on the next hesitate. Smash a ram's crew once, and their rhythm stutters for the next 3 runs. Keep the tempo stones when they cluster, arrows when they scatter, silence when they expect noise, and you turn the air itself into a script the attackers can't read. Up here, patience isn't passive. It's predatory, waiting for the moment when the most weight meets the least balance, then letting go. But no matter how fierce the crown of a castle is, the fight rarely starts at the parapet. Before ladders scrape stone and darts take flight, the ground itself picks a side. And if that ground has been dug, flooded, and engineered to say no, it means the battle begins in a trench that eats time and courage. Before arrows hiss and ladders scrape stone, there's a quiet bully hugging the base of the walls. The moat. It looks simple, just a big trench, maybe with water, maybe not, but it's one of the most efficient pieces of medieval problem-solving ever dug. A moat steals momentum, devours time, and turns confident plans into confused project management meetings held at spear point. You don't just cross the moat. You pay the moat every foot, every minute, every man. Let's start with why a hole in the ground matters so much. The basic physics of siege warfare says, you need pressure. Rams need a running start. Ladders need steady footing. Siege towers need straight, firm lanes to roll. Sappers need to get close and stay there. A moat says no to all of that by removing solid ground where you want it most. Even a dry ditch 5 to 10 feet deep and a few body lengths wide is enough to break formation, spread ranks thin, and force a pause, pauses that defenders use like a metronome to time their punishment from above. Fill that ditch with water, and now you've added buoyancy, mud, and panic. A water-filled moat doesn't have to be ocean deep to be effective. 2 or 3 feet of murky soup can turn a sprint into a shuffle. Think thigh-deep sludge, armoured men seeing only ripples where the footing suddenly drops, and a ram team discovering their unstoppable log floats just enough to wobble when it should slam. Boats? Technically possible, practically suicidal when archers are painting the surface with quarrels. Throw a few sunken obstacles under the surface stakes, chains, broken carts, and you get a medieval obstacle course you can't see until you trip it. Moats also bully a favourite medieval tactic: tunnelling. Sapping digging under a wall to make it collapse depends on dry, stable earth. Put a wet ditch against a curtain wall, and the water table rises right where a miner wants to work. Try to tunnel, and your cavity seeps, then fills, then drowns. Your fire meant to burn the supports. Even a dry moat helps here. It forces the sapper's start point farther from the wall, meaning longer tunnels, more spoil to hide, and more chances for defenders to hear or intercept a dig with countermine shafts. In short, the moat doesn't just block the top route, it sabotages the under route. But we'll fill it, says the confident commander, who has never actually thrown dirt into a ditch while people are shooting at him. Filling a moat is theoretically simple. Tip in fascines, bundles of sticks, roll in logs, shovel earth, repeat until you've made a causeway. In practice, the first waves of labourers die. The second waves slip on wet bundles and die. The third waves get rocks to the helmet and drop their loads, creating unstable layers that shift when troops finally step onto them. It's thankless, endless work, and you can't hide that you're doing it. Defenders see the pile grow and adjust the music. Arrows for the men, large stones for the bundles, burning pitch for the top layer so the whole mess smokes and sinks. Drawbridges add another layer of nope. A well-tuned counterweight system can raise a bridge from almost across to vertical shield in seconds, and when it slams up, iron studs on the outer face shrug off fire and rams alike. Sometimes a drawbridge doesn't even rest on the far bank. It lands on removable stone corbels or posts that can be knocked out or burned. dropping the road out from under, charging troops like a prank built by an engineer with a mean streak. And a few castles stacked these. Outer bridge, inner bridge, postern bridge, multiple little heartbreaks in series. The dry moat deserves more respect than it gets in paintings. A trench with steep, revetted sides, think stone-lined or hard-packed earth, can be trickier than water. At the bottom, sharpened stakes angled to spear ankles, iron caltrops that turn a running step into a prayer, and low pits concealed with brush that swallow a soldier up to the thigh, perfect height for the next arrow to find a gap. If the climate allowed it, or if the Lord was feeling theatrical, add unfriendly wildlife. Snakes and eels show up in a few lively accounts. Whether that was common or just colourful storytelling, the effect is the same. Rumours turn trenches into nightmares. Moats also speak in the language of looks. A broad, mirror-like moat makes a castle seem untouchable even when the water's only waist deep. That's not a scam. It's strategy. If you can make an enemy commander hesitate, if you can make him rethink the schedule he promised his lord, you're already winning. Some moats were engineered to be exactly as deep as they looked, but many were tuned for optics. Wide, reflective, and hard to judge from the far bank while you're wearing a helmet that narrows your world to a letterbox. There's a maintenance side to all this too. Water moats need feed rivers, springs, diverted streams and outlets so they don't stagnate into disease ponds. Sluice gates let defenders adjust levels, high to thwart an assault, lowered to flush filth or reveal obstacles for repair. Clever castles could flood their ditches on demand by opening upstream gates, turning a dry approach lane into a sudden marsh. Dry moats, meanwhile, demand sturdy sides that don't collapse into the trench when it rains, and plenty of labour to clear landslides, reset stakes, and remove whatever the besiegers tried to dump in last season. And then there's the smell. Medieval life didn't come with modern sanitation, and creative lords weaponized that reality. Waste tipped into the ditch made crossing both physically horrific and psychologically corrosive. Imagine standing knee-deep in what used to be dinner, while a tower above you pelts you with stones. War is already a test of nerve. A foul moat erodes it in ways steel can't. So how do you beat a moat? Options exist, but none are friendly. Portable bridges light enough for teams to carry, long enough to span the gapwork if your archers can suppress the wall long enough to plant them. Siege towers can bridge some moats with their own drawbridges, but only if the ground near the ditch is firm and level. Ladders across narrow trenches are possible, but now your ladder is a teetering seesaw instead of a climb. Fascines and gabions, big wicker baskets filled with earth, can build a causeway, but they require days of prep and a small forest's worth of material. And every hour you spend weaving baskets or bundling sticks is an hour the castle spends sharpening hooks, stockpiling stones, and rehearsing who drops what when. Night crossings promise surprise, but surprise fades the first time someone slips and splashes. Moonlight turns a moat's surface into a silver tattletale, and if you try winter, beware. A thin ice crust tempts fate. Break through, and a man in mail becomes a bell clang, splash, shout ringing an alarm that never fails to wake the walls. The moat's greatest trick may be this. It forces attackers to commit early. To cross, you have to concentrate men and materials in a predictable place. Once you do, the defenders know exactly where to aim every dart, stone, and unkind idea they've saved for a rainy day. The ditch collects not just water but intent, and intent is easier to shoot than panic scattered across a field. From the defender's view, the moat is a comfort and a chore. It buys time, shapes the enemy, and lets the gatehouse and battlements perform at their best. But it also needs care dredging, shoring, clearing, and alert eyes to watch for quiet enemy projects. A causeway creeping forward behind mantlets, a bridge piece by piece at the edge of darkness, a gabion wall inching closer like a woven hedge. And remember, the moat isn't alone. On either side of that trench, towers peer down, walls bristle with loops, and the gatehouse readies its teeth. The ditch is just the first verse of a song the whole castle sings together: slow the enemy, stretch them thin, strip their courage, then punish the pieces that try to jump. Suppose an army does the impossible, bridges the ditch under fire, rips the drawbridge chains, rushes the threshold. The fight turns vertical again, up along towers that command not just the wall but the space beyond it. Towers aren't there for decoration, or to give artists something to draw on postcards. They're the castle's eyes, knuckles, and nerve centers. If the curtain wall is a castle's backbone, the towers are its senses and fists, seeing first, striking far, and steadying the whole body when the hit lands. They're not just pretty cylinders on postcards. They're where height turns into awareness, where geometry becomes a weapon, and where a garrison's heartbeat is kept on time. Start with the obvious. Towers see. A good watch crew on the crown of a high tower can read the horizon hours earlier than anyone in the yard. They're scanning for dust plumes, glints on helmets, smoke on roads, tiny tells that say, "Company's coming." Signal gear lives up here. Flags for day, lanterns and braziers for night, horns for everything in between. On a clear evening, a beacon chain can throw a warning from ridge to ridge like a medieval relay race. Light here, light there. A serpent of fire that lets neighbouring lords shut gates, drive herds to safety, and muster before the first trumpet sounds below your own wall. But sight is only half the story. Form is the other. Early on, many towers were square because squares are easy to lay out and stack stone for. Then attackers learned to hug the blind corners, chip at protected seams, and bring rams against big flat faces. The reply was elegant. Curve it. Round and D-shaped towers eliminate dead angles, turn direct blows into glancing ones, and deny a ram that satisfying square on target. You can feel the difference with your knuckles tap a barrel versus a brick. One gives, one chips. The medieval battlefield learned that lesson in ashlar and lime. Spacing is strategy. Towers along a curtain weren't placed whenever the view gets boring. They're paced roughly a longbow cast apart, so their fields of fire overlap. That overlap matters. The ground tucked tight against the base of the wall, the place attackers think is safe from the parapet's downward shots, gets raked sideways by archers in the tower faces. It's the flanking geometry that turns hug the wall and live into hug the wall and meet a quarrel in your ribs. Corner towers are the multipliers, sweeping two curtains at once. Spur towers project outward to stitch the near field with even nastier angles. Inside, towers are vertical cities. Each level is a room with a job. Ground floors often windowless, double as secure stores or prisons. Fighting galleries higher up have arrow loops splayed wide, to give an archer generous aim, while he shows the outside world as little of himself as possible. The top platform is the business end. Parapet, merlons, sometimes machicolations jutting like stone teeth so you can drop surprise through the floor instead of leaning over the edge. Stairs coil everything together tight, steep, and usually clockwise as you climb, which gifts defenders coming down a wider swing for their right hand and cramps the sword arm of an attacker coming up. Those stairs are more than a fitness test. They're flow control. In a crisis, you don't want a human traffic jam that blocks fresh fighters or keeps wounded men from getting down. Narrow treads, frequent landings, and deliberately tight turns slow a rush, and make it easy for one armoured soldier to hold a flight against several. Doors at each level are thick, with drawbars and inset grills so a tower can close itself off and continue fighting even if the next room is compromised. A well-run garrison drills the drill. When the horn sounds 3 short, this stair is for up only. When it sounds 1 long, runners get priority with arrows and water. Communication turns a stack of rooms into a single machine. Simple codes, 2 horn notes for shift to the north wall, a red pennon for sprinkled ready, 3 torch dips for enemy sappers. Let a commander swing resources without shouting himself hoarse. Runners move under cover on wall walks to deliver specifics. You, with the hooks tower, 2 needs them now. When it works, the line looks like choreography. A sprinkled cranks as 2 archers crouch. The giant dart sings. Archers pop up to fill the gap. A runner slides in with a bundle of quarrels. A bucket line shuffles, ready to douse any fire that sticks. Gate towers are their own beasts. Flanking the castle's mouth, they're short-range bullies with long memories. Every trick inside the gatehouse murder holes, crossfire lanes, bends that kill momentum has a partner up in those towers. From above, crews oversee the portcullis chains, count the ram strokes, and time their drops. If an enemy unit punches through the outer doors, the gate towers slam the inner grates and turn the passage into a meat grinder stone from the roof, bolts from the loops, heated sand through the holes. Their job isn't just to kill, it's to separate the first brave dozen from the 100 behind them, and erase the dozen before the 100 can help. Towers carry tools the curtain can't. A sprinkled think giant crossbow on a frame needs floor space and stability. A tower room with stout beams gives it both. Want to throw a barrel of stones or a jar of pitch that breaks into sticky fire? Do it from a machicolated platform where you're not risking a tumble. Need a sortie under cover? A postern door at the tower's base lets a squad slip out along the moat edge, while the wall above drowns the noise with arrows. In a long siege, towers also become workshops. Fletchers repairing shafts, smiths setting new heads on darts, carpenters planing fresh mantlets to give crossbowmen mobile cover on the parapet. Not all towers are equal. Some are statements fat, drum-like monsters that say, "don't even." Others are leaner, placed for angles rather than intimidation. The ultimate tower, though, stands apart. The keep, or great tower. It's the core redoubt, the last word, the place where the Lord sleeps and, if the worst happens, the garrison makes its final stand. A proper keep has its own well, its own stores, and stairs that can be choked one landing at a time. If the outer wards fall, life contracts to that stone stack. Doors bar. Arrows slide into loops. The chapel becomes a hospital, the hall a barracks, the roof a platform for flares and prayers. If a banner still flies there, the castle isn't finished speaking. Maintenance keeps all of this honest. Rain eats mortar. Frost prees joints. Wind loosens hoardings. Between sieges, masons repoint faces, carpenters replace rotten sills beneath loops, and watch captains walk the line poking for soft spots with iron spikes. A tower is only as good as last winter's work. Smart lords spend in peace what they hope not to bleed in war. Psychology, as always, rides shotgun with physics. A tall, clean tower with a glittering weather vane does more than please the eye it eats at an attacker's resolve. You can see the people watching you from up there. You know they can hit you long before you touch stone. The tower is a promise. We saw you early. We'll reach you first. We'll still be here when your cook runs out of grain. That promise gets louder when night falls and a beacon flares, throwing your camp's shadows at impossible angles while horns answer from valleys you didn't know had neighbors. Do towers fail? Sometimes. Fire crawls up hoardings. Trebuchets pound the same seam until the face sloughs. A sapper finds the one patch of bad footing and the ground sighs. Inside, discipline can crack panic on a stair, someone opening a door at the wrong horn call, a runner dropping the pin that keeps the portcullis from slipping. But towers are built to forgive single mistakes. They compartmentalize. One floor burns, seal it and fight from the roof. One stair chokes, the postern still works. One sprinkled snaps, the parapet still has stones and bows. Redundancy is the quiet hero of medieval design. In the grand math of a siege, towers buy what matters most: time and options. Time for allies to answer your beacon. Time for fever to move through the enemy camp. Time for weather to turn the ditch into soup. Options to sally, to signal, to redistribute weight, to choose where the next minute hurts the attacker most. Each minute you hold a tower's crown is a minute gravity fights for you, and the enemy pays interest on every day he stays. Yet height and angles can only win the hours if the people inside can survive the weeks. Stone doesn't feed you. Parapets don't quench thirst. A garrison that can see for miles still dies in days without water and food. That's why beneath the towers, under flags and bells and dart frames, are the quiet systems that keep a locked-down castle alive. Deep wells, cool undercrofts, counted barrels, ration boards, and routines that turn fear into a timetable. Close the gates, haul up the drawbridge, slam the bars, now what? The bravado on the battlements only works if the people behind them can last long enough to make patience a weapon. A castle in siege mode becomes a small, tightly managed city where everything water, grain, light, breath has a plan. The fight outside is noisy. The fight inside is arithmetic. Start with the thirst problem. Stone doesn't quench it, and a week without rain will tell on every throat. Smart builders drilled wells first before the wall, before the hall straight through soil and chalk into bedrock aquifers. Some plunges went dizzying depths. The bucket's echo could feel like it took a full second to come home. Windlasses had to be geared, so a single person could haul while armoured men shuffled past. In busy seasons, well courts ran shifts like bakeries. If geology was unkind, castles added enormous cisterns under courtyards and roofs, gutters whispering rain into cool darkness through filters of gravel and charcoal. A good cistern is a silent hero, no poetry, just gallons. Drinking water still wasn't the only drink. Brewhouses ran in peacetime and overdrive in war. Small ale, low alcohol, quick to ferment was a hydration strategy with bubbles. It stored safer than raw water, kept workers steady, and yes, took the edge off the idea that 1,000 strangers were camping beyond the moat, wondering about you. Wine did the job where grapes grew, souring into vinegar when barrels ran long, useful for pickling and cleaning even when the cup didn't glow. Fermenters were as strategic as towers, and a good brewer was worth more than a loud night. Food lived in the undercroft, the castle's cool stomach. Grain first, sacks of rye, barley, and wheat, piled high on raised platforms so damp and rats could be kept at bay. Beans and peas, the siege all-stars, waited in bins. They're dense with protein, friendly to long storage, and forgiving in bad years. Hanging from beams, smoked sides of bacon, cured hams, dried fish like boards. Wheels of hard cheese took treasure space, rolled to rotate stock and rubbed with salt like you'd polish a shield. When the horn called store check, stewards moved like accountants with knives, chalking lids, noting weights, measuring the slow arithmetic of survival. Bread was morale in a round loaf. The bakehouse's great oven ate fuel, spit warmth, and marked the day's rhythm. Querns and hand mills kept arms sore and flour pouring. Millers counted stones and teeth like a farrier checks hooves. If the siege dragged, bread recipes changed. Less wheat, more barley and pea flour, perhaps a whisper of acorn or chestnut. Fortress flavour, the steward might joke, not fooling anyone. Pottage, eternal friend of medieval kitchens, simmered in cauldrons. The day's ration of grain, a scatter of dried beans, whatever herb baskets the garden could still spare. Fat skimmed from yesterday's pot to remind today's pot why it lives. It wasn't feasting, it was continuity. Ration boards went up where everyone could see them. Chalk lines divided days. Names or units took columns. A garrison that trusts the ledger fights harder. The steward's key hung on a cord like a relic. To lose it would be a sin. Commanders rationed in slices. A little less meat now, so there's some later. A little more ale on the day the enemy's trebuchet arrives. A sweet for the watch that pulls the midnight rain. Quiet leadership lives in those decisions. Grumbling is violent in a siege. You blunt it with fairness and a spoon. Animals needed their ledger too. Warhorses ate like nobility and could not be turned into dinner unless desperation had already knocked. Donkeys and oxen pulled and brayed and turned mills. Their haystacks shrank visibly day by grey day. Chickens turned scraps into eggs. Pigs turned anything into more pig. And both turned into protein the moment the steward's chalk demanded it. When space got tight, animals moved down, vaulted cellars full of warmth and smell, or out to the inner ward, where boys with switches kept them from eating the herb bed that made pottage taste like something. Sanitation is the siege's unpoetic crisis. Latrines, garderobes tucked into outer walls, so waste fell clear into the ditch or into purpose-dug pits. In peacetime, they were practical. In war, they were vulnerabilities and lightning rods for misery. The moment flames licked a chute, bucket lines formed men and women passing water hand to hand up tight stairs that steamed and slipped underfoot. Chamber pots multiplied when the chutes were risky. So did the jobs no ballad celebrates: hauling, dumping, liming. Lime powder turned stink into less, stink and disease into maybe less disease. No one was precious about it. Survival drags glamour into the yard and gives it a shovel. Fire was the other invisible siege. Kitchens ran hot because you had to eat. Forges ran because iron bends best when the hammer sings. But a single spark from a thatched stable roof, a single ember nudged by a night wind, could write disaster faster than any trebuchet. Fire hooks hung beside every stair. Skins and buckets waited by doorways. The watch rotated to include a smoke nose, the person whose job was literally to sniff. In a storm, you bank the ovens, bank the forges, sleep with wet cloth ready, and pray the lightning picks the enemy camp as a target. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Medicine, such as it was, lived between prayer and practice. A chest held needles, linen, honey, vinegar, dried herbs, yarrow for bleeding, willow bark for pain, comfrey for hope. The surgeon's knife knew two tricks: cut and cauterize. Broken bones set in slings, burns wrapped and rewrapped, arrowheads twisted out with iron tools heated to ugly. Across the hall, the chapel did its part: candles for saints, chants for fear. the priest's voice tuning the garrison's dread into something manageable. No illusions here. Medicine saved some, lost many, and everyone knew the difference between courage and luck only after the fever broke. Routine turns panic into a schedule. Watches cycled, 2 hours up, 4 down, rotated so the same eyes didn't always squint into the same dawn. Drills turned into habits. Drop the portcullis on the third horn, fetch stones for tower 2 if a red flag goes up, duck and cover on one short and one long. Children, because sieges pulled in whole villages, ran messages where small feet fit faster. Old men sharpened stakes. Weavers repaired sling cords and bowstrings with fingers that remembered the First War. Chessboards and dice appeared at noon, because you can't hold a line that never breathes. The game pieces thumped, bright beads on dull hours. Craft never slept. The forge set rivets in helmets dented that morning. Fletchers sat cross-legged, shafts between knees, binding feathers smooth and true. Carpenters built mantlets, portable shields to push along the wall, planing rough edges because a splinter in a gauntleted hand is a small curse when a big one is on its way. Stonecutters trimmed wedges for a cracked merlon. Masons slathered mortar into frost. Bit seams and beat joints tight with mallets that sounded like heartbeat on the parapet. The castle hummed, and the hum said, "Not yet. Morale matters like oxygen." The Lord made a point of being seen on the wall at dawn, at rations at noon, in the chapel at night. A joke from a captain at the right moment is a stronger lintel than stone. So are small mercies. A song in the yard, a story told low by the cook while the pot breathes, a coin pressed into a boy's palm who ran in the rain with news that mattered. Even the show helps. Banners dried and rehung, shields polished enough to catch light, horns answered like you meant it. The enemy hears that confidence across the ditch, and sometimes that's the only arrow that hits. Not every day is waiting. Some nights deserve knives and quiet feet. The same fortress that shuts in survival can open small, secret mouths to spit trouble. Sallyport's postern doors hidden in shadowed angles let a dozen picked men slide out along the moat with jars of pitch and a rope with hooks. A quick sprint, a strike at an unattended causeway, a tug to topple a ladder bank, and back through the slot before the camp wakes properly. Those little victories feed a week of courage. They also demand corridors and doors no enemy ever sees. And that is the next hinge in our story. Behind the obvious halls and bright courtyards lies a second map of a castle. Concealed stairs, offset doorways, passages under floors and through thick walls, exits that open like sentences you only say when the company is wrong. They were carved slow, disguised carefully, and kept in heads like family secrets because sometimes the strongest defense is a door nobody knows is there. A good castle wears its strength on the outside towers, teeth and stone that dares you to try. A great castle hides a second skin on the inside. A web of quiet roots that let defenders cheat distance, vanish from one place and appear in another, and step out into the night exactly where an enemy least expects a boot to land. If the gatehouse is the fortress's jaw, then these are its nerves and tendons invisible until they move, unforgettable when they do. Start with the most honest of the hidden doors, the Sallyport. The name sounds delicate, the job is not. A Sallyport is a small, tight, easily barred door tucked into a fold of masonry or the end of a wall where shadow lives. From outside, it's a seam your eye slides past. From inside, it's a promise. You can hit first. In a siege, a picked squad fast, quiet, mean assembles in the passage behind it. The captain counts breaths. A signal knocks once from the wall above. The bar lifts. In a rush and a whisper of mail, the door yawns just wide enough for a man and a bundle of trouble. What kind of trouble? Pitch jars with rags for fuses. Hooks on ropes meant to snag ladders and causeways. Axes for cutting ram slings. Hammers for stakes. The goal isn't to kill 1,000 men. It's to ruin an hour the enemy can't spare. Topple the gabions they stacked all day. Burn the wicker screens that shield their crossbows. Collapse the near edge of a new bridge. So 2 days of labor slumps into the ditch with a hiss. Then you're gone back through the same slit, the bar across, and the night swallowing footprints while the camp wakes to flames and shouting. A postern is a cousin to the Sallyport, also small, also hidden, but often opens into safer ground. A riverbank, a steep ravine, a patch of trees the garrison keeps by design. Posterns have chores. In peace, they're couriers' shortcuts and discreet exits for a lord who doesn't want a procession every time he leaves to hunt. In war, they're lifelines. a way to fetch water when the main well jams, a route to slip messengers past a loose ring, a path to evacuate children and elders if the outer ward turns to smoke. Their hardware reflects that responsibility: thick leaves, heavy bars, multiple locks, and doorways set at awkward angles so even if a battering ram could reach them, it couldn't get a square hit. Hidden doesn't mean careless. These passages and doors are architecture with trust issues. The runs are narrow 2 shoulders wide at most, so defenders can block them with a single man if a chase goes wrong. Floors tilt subtly toward the inside to shed rain and spilled oil away from the door seam. Steps are uneven on purpose to trip anyone running who doesn't know the rhythm. And a proper sally tunnel kinks once or twice, so a straight shot with a spear never goes more than a dozen paces. If an enemy does force a postern, he meets a turn and a choke, where one shield and a stack of spare spears buy time for the wall above to wake up. Castles used interior passages for more than midnight mischief. Thick walls hide corridors like bones hide marrow. A door in a hall's panelling might open into a shoulder-wide run that tracks inside the curtain, letting archers slip from one cluster of loops to the next without exposing themselves on the wall walk. Spiral stairs appear where there's no tower, linking hall to parapet, kitchen to turret, lord's chamber to chapel gallery. An inner-outer rhythm emerges, public rooms with fireplaces and light, private arteries with lantern hooks blackened from years of smoke, chalk marks at hand height so you can feel your way in the dark, and niches where runners rest a moment to let armoured men clatter past. Storage sneaks into these arteries too. Behind a hinged panel, racks of spare bowstrings and fletched shafts. In a pocket under the stair, a bin of rounded stones sorted by fist, loaf and melon. A low recess holds a coil of rope and a folded hook-frame iron pieces that slot together like a cruel erector set to snag ladders and mantlets. The castle's tidiness is no accident. It's logistics wearing a cloak. When a horn call drags a squad from the inner ward to Tower 3, they can grab what they need without tripping back through the yard and announcing their plan to the enemy with clatter and shouting. Not every secret is a door you can walk through. Some are doors you shouldn't. Decoy corridors convincing starts that lead to dead ends exist to confuse intruders in the rare bad moment when a wall is breached. A raider dashes into a side door expecting a stair up to a parapet and instead finds a blank wall and a slit above where 3 archers have been waiting for exactly that mistake. Pits disguised by dark floors make short work of the impatient. In damp castles, a tunnel might slope into a low chamber that floods predictably at high water. From inside, you'd never open its inner grille. From outside, you might squeeze in and learn something about hypothermia. There's a darker page in this ledger. Betrayal. Secret ways are power, and power draws plots. A forgotten postern. A bribe to a porter. A note passed in a market via a confessional door some strongholds fell. Not because their walls failed, but because their secrets changed loyalty. That's why garrisons counted keys like relics and rotated door crews, so no one man knew all the tricks. A captain might hold 2 of the 4 bars needed to open a particular postern. A chaplain might hold the 3rd. The 4th might hide in an iron box chained to a beam and sealed with the Lord's ring. Drama? Yes. Paranoia? Also yes. But a secret you can't open alone is a secret that doesn't walk off in someone's pocket. Knowledge of the map was itself rationed. New soldiers learned their tower, their stair, their 2 nearest loops, and the location of water and stones. Only trusted runners and sergeants learned the through lines, the stitch that lets you move from the gatehouse roof to the North Barbican, without setting foot in the yard. Children knew the safe paths to the baker and the well. They didn't know which panel in the hall opens to a stair that spits you onto the keep's roof. The lord, the castellan, and a handful of old hands could draw the whole web in ash with a stick. Everyone else carried a fragment, because fragments don't betray a fortress unless they're assembled. Some castles extended their secret ways beyond the wall entirely. Chalk and sandstone encouraged dreams. Tunnels bored through soft rock to emerge in ravines, in copses, behind boulders. These weren't subways for whole armies, just narrow throats to let a dozen men ghost out with torch stubs wrapped in cloth, then ghost back with news or spoils from a burned supply cart. Vent holes disguised as animal burrows spotted the ground above, whispering smoke out of the earth like the hillside had opinions. Building those took years, quiet budgets, and a willingness to have sections collapse and be cleared again. But on the one night, when a beacon flared from a neighbour's hill, and the garrison needed to send a messenger who couldn't be tracked, A tunnel was worth all the years of damp and darkness. The psychology of hidden paths is as important as their geometry. To defenders, their courage, knowing you can move when the yard is a storm of darts. To attackers, their superstition stories of men appearing behind the ram at midnight, of arrows from nowhere, of a door you swore wasn't there at noon yawning open in moonlight. Uncertainty breeds caution. Caution slows momentum. Slow momentum is a wall's favorite flavor of time. None of this deletes risk. Every extra door is a chance for a latch to rot, a hinge to squeal, a fool to forget a bar. Secret stairs collect smoke when fire comes hunting. A sally party can miscount heartbeats and open into a patrol they didn't hear. A tunnel's roof can decide after a wet spring that today is the day it remembers it's just compacted earth. So stewards schedule inspections like prayers. Carpenters shave and oil hinges. Boys with good ears sit with their backs to stone and listen for rats where there shouldn't be rats and drips where there shouldn't be drips. Maintenance is the spell that keeps secrets from turning into ghosts. Why so much bother for footpaths and hidden doors when towers, walls and moats already do so much? Because movement wins choices. A static defender is a target. A moving defender is a rumor. Hidden ways let a small garrison act big, show up in 3 places, vanish from 2, hit where it hurts, and then be gone before the camp's bell finishes ringing. They knit the castle into one organism that can flex around impact instead of cracking under it. Even with every secret at their disposal, defenders still faced the loud math of siege engines rolling closer the rams, the towers, the trebuchets that threw rocks big enough to make the ground swear. The walls had answers ready: hooks, fire, counterweight tricks, and surgical strikes at night. The next round of the game wasn't about whispering through tunnels, it was about shouting back at machines bigger than houses. Sieges don't stay polite for long. Once scouts finish measuring ditches and carpenters stop sharpening stakes, the enemy rolls up its heavy arguments, battering rams in shaggy wooden sheds, siege towers creaking like barns on wheels, and trebuchets that throw boulders big enough to make the wall flinch. The castle's answer isn't to admire the craftsmanship, it's to ruin the rhythm of those machines, until courage and carpentry both give out. Start with the ram, the bully that wants the shortest conversation possible. Picture a great log, iron-headed, slung on chains inside a wheeled shelter, the sow, its roof layered with wet hides to resist fire. A crew chants time, the head kisses the gate or wall, and shock looks for a crack to love. From the defender's side, the counters are simple and mean. Wait first. Boulders and beams dropped exactly when the log swings back, so its next forward arc meets a sudden world of pain chains. Snap, frames, buckle, crew scatter. Hooks next. Iron grapnels on ropes snag the sow's roof. Teams on the wall lean and heave to twist the frame sideways until one wheel lifts, then gravity finishes the argument. Fire when possible. Jars of pitch, then torches, then every bucket you've saved, not for dousing flames, but for feeding them. Wet hides slow fire. Sustained heat and grit defeat hides. Geometry helps. A gate backed by a killing corridor, the gatehouse we walked through earlier, turns a ram into a trapped guest. Even outside, many gates sit behind a slight inward slope. The ram head never gets a truly square hit, and every imperfect blow bleeds energy. If the enemy tries a ram at the curtain instead, the talus, that outward slanting wall base, makes the head ride up and kiss stone at weak angles. Meanwhile, archers on flanks pick off the crew who must stand partly exposed to keep the log swinging. Siege towers aim to cancel the parapet's advantage with height of their own. Multi-story boxes rolling on fat wheels, fronted by a drawbridge that wants to land square on your wall. Inside, ladders and ramps funnel men upward while shieldmen guard slits. The counters start before the tower moves. Ground denial ditches, stakes and churned mud turns wheels into idiots. As the tower inches closer, defenders send fire. Not random flame, but targeted flaming bolts at seams where planks meet. Jars of burning resin at the tower's windward face, so the draft feeds the blaze up and in. Hooks again. Long-beaked poles reaching to the tower's crown to tug its top off. True. A few inches of lean becomes a slow horror for men on high floors. Their footing tells them long before their brains do that this box wants to die on its side. If the tower survives to touch the wall, the bridge is the new villain. Crews try to slam it onto the parapet and make a smooth path. Defenders jam stout beams like fangs between merlons to keep the bridge from seating. or they collapse a small portion of parapet at a chosen spot, a counterintuitive move, so the bridge lands into a shallow pit with vertical sides. Now the first men across step into a box, lined with spear points and loops at kissing distance. Elsewhere along the crest, hoardings bolted on in a hurry give overhang. Through their floor holes, rocks and scalding surprises fall into the tower's face. Trebuchets are a different mood patient, distant, relentless. A counterweight trebuchet can lob stones the size of a sheep from far enough back that arrows can't harass its crews. You don't block a trebuchet, you manage it. First you predict. Watchmen learn the cadence winch, cock, load, release, and call timing. Crews on the wall step off exposed sections for the 2 heartbeats when the stone will land, then flow back to repair and return fire. Second, you soften the target. Behind the outer face, defenders build earthen ramps and timbering to absorb shock, so a hit doesn't translate into a long, lethal crack. Third, you answer at night. Sorties the castle's knife-worked love trebuchet parks. Ropes cut, pins stolen, throwing slings slashed, fire laid on grease and timber. If the garrison has its own engines, counter-battery duels begin rarely decisive, always morale-shaping. Attackers won't stick to the big 3. They'll push mantlets, portable wooden shields on wheels to shelter crossbowmen. They'll plant pavises like a forest and advance in leaps. They'll try sapping, tunnels driven under a wall propped with timbers, then fired so the ground collapses and the masonry above with it. The wall's replies have been rehearsed for centuries, against mantlets and pavises, plunging fire from machicolations, stones that bounce and break ribs behind boards, and darts from springles that punch straight through layer and man. Against saps, listening posts, bowls of water or drumheads set on flagstones to reveal distant scratching, then countermine galleries driven to intercept. When tunnels meet, defenders smoke the enemy out with damp straw or asphyxiate with burning sulfur and pitch. If the soil allows, they flood the passage. In some places, a shaft opened inside the curtain lets defenders drop down into the attacker's tunnel for a short, savage fight in a space sized for one brave person at a time. The nastiest exchange of the age wasn't always stone. Sometimes it was rot. Attackers hurled dead animals or worse over the walls, hoping for disease. The reply was blunt and orderly. Burial pits ready, lime slaked and waiting, waste management drilled like a parade. If the besiegers wanted to trade filth, castles obliged in kind, catapulting the insult back along with baskets of bees or wasp nests when the season allowed. It wasn't chivalry, it was ecology weaponized. Hoardings deserve a shout. Imagine wooden galleries that bolt to the wall's face, projecting out with slots in the floor. When a siege begins, carpenters sprint these into place. Pegged frames, boarded fronts, braces hammered home. They extend the kill zone straight down, letting defenders work with confidence over open air. Attackers answer with fire arrows. Defenders stage water and wet hides, station bucket lines, and pre-soak the boards when a major assault is brewing. If flames take anyway, a pinned hoarding can be kicked free to fall burning into the ditch and deny ground. Small, cumulative miseries round out the suite. Caltrops sown at night near the ram lane turn morning into a limp. Iron chains hidden under shallow water foul boat keels, tasked with bridging a moat. A sudden roll of spiked beams down a slope into a cluster of ladders forces men to look up and back at once, the exact posture that drops shields. Whistles and drums run deception. False alarms that make crews brace and waste their strength. Then a real one when their guard sags. The goal isn't just to break wood, it's to break tempo. A ram that pauses too long between strokes loses energy. A tower that can't advance in a clean line exposes its side. A trebuchet park robbed of pins becomes an assembly of heavy, sullen sticks. Sometimes the best counter is brutally constructive. Add wall. Under bombardment, masons lay a low counterfort against the inside face, an earthen and timber buttress that drinks shock. Big cracks get stitched with fresh stones, and iron cramps poured with molten lead. If a merlon shatters, carpenters raise a mantlet in its place in minutes. The wall breathes, repairs, and presents the same hard silhouette by afternoon that looked wounded at dawn. That resilience demoralizes outsiders faster than taunts. Of course, engines do crack castles. A gate burns when wind and resin conspire. A tower face slavs after a week of disciplined throws. A sap caves a curtain where the geology was a liar. Yet even then, The design insists on second chances. A breach reveals a prepared inner bank, a fresh palisade, a hedgehog of angled stakes and carts that turns a clean hole into a funnel. No one wants to be first through. The inner ward lifts its banner, springles recite, and the fight relocates 20 paces backward without surrendering spirit. If there's a pattern here, it's not stone beats wood or fire beats hide. It's time beating haste. Engines demand schedules, supply chains, and clear lanes. The castle's job is to snip those threads, here a rope, there a wheel, everywhere a crew's confidence. Make the ram restart. Make the tower rethink. Make the trebuchet sleep badly. Every delay taxes purses, patience, and bodies in the muddy world beyond the ditch. And that brings us to the quiet, longest weapon in the garrison's kit. Time itself, sharpened with theatre. You feed your people, you mend your wall, you pick your moments to sting, and you let cold, cost, rumour, and boredom gnaw at the army outside. Victory often looks less like a banner over a breach, and more like smoke rising from an empty camp. Not every victory comes with a charge and a cheer. Many arrive like winter, quietly, steadily, until one morning the enemy realizes his boots are frozen and his courage is thin. Castles were built to fight minutes, hours, and weeks as surely as they fought men. If engines are the loud weapons, time is the whisper that wins. Start with the ledger outside the walls. An army eats more than it fights. Every day a siege sits, the cost runs like a leaking barrel. Wages for men-at-arms, fodder for horses, grain for bread, timber for engines, coin for bribes and news. A ram costs wood and iron once, a soldier costs bread every morning. Commanders knew this math and dreaded it. If the garrison could avoid blunders, no open gates, no fires out of control, then the castle had only to stay stubborn while the besiegers' purse grew light and their patience sour. Defenders leaned into that economics with theatre. On good days, cooks timed roasts to send the scent of meat drifting downwind at dusk. Archers lounged where the enemy could see them, gnawing ribs, lifting cups, shouting to ask if the camp wanted leftovers. It wasn't kindness. It was a knife to morale. When hunger visits a field army, it doesn't knock politely. It prowls through the horses, first thin flanks, dull eyes. Then it starts speaking in the coughs of men whose rations turned from bread to bleak. A castle that looks fed tells the camp a story. You will run out before we do. Sound became a tool too. Horns at odd hours, drums rolling from tower to tower, a sudden chorus of shouts from the inner ward. Each performance hinted at reinforcements, surprise sorties, or ceremonies for oaths newly sworn. Sometimes it was real. Often it wasn't. Deception didn't have to be perfect. It had to be frequent enough to make officers burn energy bracing for attacks that never came. After a week of false alarms, the one real midnight sally tore deeper because the men outside had learned to question every horn. Banners and silhouettes ran the same game in cloth and shadow. Spare helmets on spear points showed above merlons, turning a skeleton crew into a crowd. Fresh pennons unfurled at dawn as if new companies had mustered overnight. Lanterns bobbed along the parapet with too regular spacing. From the field, it looked like a long line of sentries when it might be 3 boys doing brisk laps with orders not to trip. And if a relief force truly was on the march, the castle made sure the rumour reached the enemy camp faster than the hooves did. Weather joined the cast as a paid actor. Winter sieges punished tents and tempers. Canvas stiffened, ropes iced. Cookfires fought wind and died. The ditch glazed and pretended to be a bridge, until a man in mail learned it was a lie. Hooves punched through crusted mud into cold water that bit fetlocks. Meanwhile, on the wall, broad cloaks hid shivers, and ration cups of hot ale stung hands into usefulness. Summer punished differently. Flies, rot, warm water that lied about being safe, meat that turned sullen by noon. A castle could schedule around climate. Repairs at dawn and dusk. Shade where possible. Cistern lids sealed tight. An open camp could only endure. Disease respected neither banner. But camps crowded, mobile, short on clean water invited it first. Latrines dug 2 shallow fouled wells. 3 days of rain turned ground into petri dish. One butcher with dirty hands sent a fever humming through 100 tents. In the yard, the stewards limed pits, stricter rationing, and a priest with a loud voice about hand-washing and boiling saved lives as surely as a good archer. When illness gnawed the besiegers, The wall answered with energy. More arrows, brighter banners, a sortie or two to enlarge the enemy's sense of being hunted by time and men. Not all psychology was fragrance and flags. Parley held power. A Castellan might meet an enemy herald on the bridge, polite, armoured, unimpressed to hear terms, and decline them with a faint smile. He'd turn back at a deliberate pace, letting every eye measure his unhurried stride. No taunts required. The performance said, "We're fine." Meanwhile, inside the gate, the steward made sure the next ration line moved smoothly within earshot. Order is music the hungry hate. Siege economies fray. Foragers range farther and return with less. A lord counts coin and writes letters with apologetic numbers. Mercenaries whisper about unpaid weeks and skirt the line between discipline and desertion. The castle can help nudge that slide. Night raids torch supply carts miles from the ditch. Scouts watch roads and pick messengers off at hedgerows. A single captured packhorse paraded on the wall is worth 3 sermons. The message is math. Your line is long, your guard is thin, and we are closer to your bread than you are to ours. Defenders also used patience as a tactic within the wall. There's a rhythm to resistance, quiet days for repair, loud days to rattle nerves, days of feigned weakness to bait a rash assault. If you answer every provocation, you bleed energy. If you answer none, you invite boldness. The sweet spot is choreographed ambivalence. Fix the crack within earshot of enemy lookouts to show the wall heals. Let one taunt pass in silence. Answer the next with a precision volley that drops the loudest mouth. Predictably unpredictable becomes doctrine, money and honor threaded through the stalemate. A besieger who couldn't crack stone might try to crack people letters slipped to sergeants promising coin for treachery, hints that the Lord's allies had forgotten him. The garrison answered by making loyalty public. Rewards for long watches. Names read at chapel of those who spotted the sapper's scratch first. A purse tipped into the surgeon's hand where all could see. Nothing expensive, everything symbolic. Treachery struggles in a culture where small gifts land often and loudly. Relief hung over every siege like weather that might break. The beacon chain mattered because armies moved slowly, and news moved slower unless you lit the night with it. A besieger hearing horns in the valley had to guess. Is that harvest or horse? The castle amplified the doubt. Lanterns went up on distant knolls, sometimes friends, sometimes boys with a donkey, and orders to walk in circles. If real allies were near, the garrison saved strength for that day, no wasteful sorties, stores safeguarded, wounded stabilized. If allies were rumors, the garrison tried to feel like a side with friends anyway. Morale is a shield you can raise with posture. None of this is invincible. A rich lord can feed an army through 2 winters. A disciplined camp can keep clean, keep quiet, keep calm, and keep its trebuchets singing until a seam gives. A garrison can crack when a single night goes wrong and fire crawls from roof to roof. But the long odds favour stone that doesn't panic. About as often as not more in some centuries, the camp woke one dawn to a different silence. Fewer cookfires, no morning horn, tracks in the mud that trailed away from engines left where they stood. The walls would watch the enemy go the way the tide goes, not because anyone won a glorious clash, but because one side kept the minutes and the other ran out of them. When a siege lifted without a breach, the first sounds inside were not cheers but brooms and orders. Fires banked, gates inspected, hoardings unbolted and stacked for repairs. The steward recalculated what was left. The priest blessed the dead. Then, maybe, a feast small but fierce with meat that had been saved for this moment, and banners rinsed and shaken dry. The message to the people who'd hidden in vaults and cellars was simple. You outlasted a problem built on wheels and wood. Tomorrow, we mend the house again. And when patience wasn't enough, when engines did their math, and a chunk of wall lay in the ditch, the castle still had chapters left. A breach was not an end. It was a room the defenders had prepared long before. Inner works, angled ditches, hedgehogs of stakes, and the organized fury of a sortie at the exact heartbeat when attackers confused hole with victory. A hole in the wall is a headline, not the story. From the field, a fresh gap looks like triumph fallen ashlar, a bite taken out of stone, dust still in the air, and men shouting that the day is theirs. From the castle's side, it's a door the defenders planned months or years ago. the entrance to a room with furniture, arranged to trip, stall, and punish. Step through a breach, and you don't find victory, you find a funnel. Let's start with shape. Trebuchets and saps rarely peel a wall away cleanly. The result is a sloped heap rubble angling up toward intact masonry. Attackers think ramp, and they're not wrong, but ramps are two-edged. Loose stone rolls under boots. Shields tilt at bad angles. A man stumbles, someone behind bashes into him, and suddenly the tight formation that gave protection becomes a pile of elbows, where a single well-timed stone from above makes 5 people sit down hard. Defenders help this chaos along wetting rubble to make it slick, tossing smaller stones to keep the surface shifting, even dumping sand so seams slide like ball bearings. Behind the breach, smart castles build depth. A low earthen bank or timber revetment, call it a counterfort, waits a few paces back, rising just high enough to turn the breach's slope into a shallow bowl. Into that bowl, carpenters drive angled stakes, hedgehogs, and wheel in carts tipped on their sides, lashings tight, so a push doesn't turn obstacles into weapons against the defenders. If time allowed, a quick palisade knits the line, rough logs sunk and braced into an instant inner fence. From the rubble ramp, the space looks open. The last 5 steps reveal the surprise. You're not in. You're caught. Angles matter like always. The intact wall flanking the breach isn't passive. Its faces bristle with loops, and where possible, temporary hoardings bolted on in a hurry once the crack started looking serious. Those overhangs let defenders drop straight into the bowl while staying behind solid timber. A corner tower's gallery peers along the breach line, turning what attackers thought was a frontal rush into a crossfire lesson. If a keep or inner curtain stands beyond, its archers and engines add a second layer of plunging fire. The geometry stacks cruelty. Forward fire from in front, flanking fire from the sides, vertical fire from above. Inside the breach room, choreography replaces panic. The garrison doesn't throw everyone at the gap. It stages the defense like scenes. First line, missile crews, archers, crossbows, are sprinkled if the footing permits working to break cohesion on the ramp. Second line, polearms, bills, glaives, gazarms, men trained to hook shields, pull legs, and pry climbers off the crest in ugly, efficient motions. Third line, reserves with short-arming swords and targes ready to step in when the front must reload or breathe. Runners cycle water, spare shafts and fresh stones to the flanks. A surgeon's bench waits under cover 2 turns back, out of direct view but close enough that a wounded man can be dragged in without creating a traffic jam. Noise is a tool here. Drummers hammer a steady beat for the polearm crews to work to lift, set, pull, step. Horns mark swaps. 2 sharp blasts and the front rank melts sideways while the second steps in, a human zipper closing and opening with as little gap as possible. From outside it looks like chaos. From the inside, it's a factory line that makes regret. Attackers aren't fools. They'll try tricks. Smoke pots rolled into the gap to blind loops, mantlets shoved ahead as mobile cover, pavises planted as a little breastwork on the crest. The defenders' answers are small and mean. Hooks again, always hooks. Reach over a mantlet and yank it offline. A stone the size of a melon dropped at an ankle breaks a stance better than 1,000 arrows. A jar of quicklime dust, cracked and shaken from above, turns brave men into people who need both hands for their eyes. If the wind's right, damp straw set smouldering behind the inner bank rolls smoke forward into the breach, not back into the yard. A stinking, sightless fight favors the home team who knows the furniture. When the enemy does mass enough bodies to crest the rubble and press into the bowl, the fight turns close and personal. This is where the hedgehog line earns its keep. A man who trips on a stake presents the top of his helmet to the next bill. A man who plants a shield against a cart edge realizes too late that he can't swing without stepping back into someone who can't move because of someone who can't move because... You get the idea. Tight quarters turn numbers into weight without leverage. The garrison wants exactly that. A dense knot, right where every angle from above converges. And if the knot grows anyway, if momentum and rage carry 50 men over the stake line and into the inner yard, the plan telescopes inward again. A prepared stop line, another rank of carts, a knee-high wall, even tables from the great hall suddenly doing duty as barricades waits a dozen paces further in. Behind it, fresh defenders kneel with spears set at belly height. The ground between has been curated paving stones pried up to make ankle-biters, buckets of water tossed to slick the path, perhaps a concealed pit hastily dug and covered with planks and a sprinkling of dirt. One wrong step turns a charge into comedy, a heartbeat before it turns into tragedy. At some point in this grind, the castle flips the switch from absorb to counterpunch. A sortie through a nearby postern or sally port hits the back of the crowd on the ramp. It's a small squad, 10, 12 at most, with orders to cut, shove, topple ladders, and then leave. Their job isn't heroics, it's to turn a press into a crush, so the men in the bowl look up and see their escape route fill with bodies and fear. Meanwhile, a gate tower might drop a short surprise portcullis from a hidden slot across a corridor that attackers thought would lead to the inner ward. Suddenly the breach isn't an entrance, it's a pen. Rocks and bolts turn pens into lessons. Command under this stress is its own craft. Someone with a clear voice and a small drum or a whistle stands just out of the direct lane and does 3 jobs at once. Call rotations, call targets, ram crew, right face, and call calm. Panic is contagious, so is pace. A steady, up-down pull step, shouted through smoke, becomes a rope people can grab with their ears. When a unit wavers, that same voice shifts them out before the wobble becomes a hole. Fresh bodies step in, and the line's personality resets. On the wall above, a signaller watches the ramp for the sign that the assault is finally breaking. The moment shields go from forward to high, when men start looking sideways, always sideways, for a friend who isn't there. That's when stones stop and arrows start again, because runners beat sprinters when a crowd decides to flee. What if the breach is too big? What if relentless throws or a treacherous foundation shears a span so wide the inner bank looks like a brave gesture instead of a plan? Then the castle does the blunt, brilliant thing. It moves the wall. A palisade of heavy timbers goes up in a shallow arc set back from the fall, braces biting into the yard side, earth shoveled against it as fast as human backs can lift. Think of it as a wooden smile behind a broken tooth. Behind that, another line waits a hedge of spears, then a line of archers because the gap is now a corridor with perfect sightlines. In a day, sometimes less, a new face looks out. It isn't pretty. It doesn't need to be. It needs to say, pay again. Sometimes, the right move is also the ugliest. Collapse more wall. If a partial face leans at a prayerful angle over the breach, masons advise, carpenters brace, and the castellan makes the call. Wedges and ropes bring down what gravity plans to take soon anyway, doubling the rubble, wrecking the enemy's half-built ramp, and buying another 12 or 24 hours while dust and shock reset the board. Few choices feel worse. Few reward nerves so efficiently. None of this discounts the courage outside. Men who climb into breaches know exactly what waits. They go anyway because orders, coin, pride, or because the person next to them went and the world turns on that kind of momentum. Castles win not by belittling that courage, but by bleeding it minute by minute, breath by breath until the cost of standing on that slope outweighs the fantasy of pouring through into a feast hall and declaring the day yours. A breach is a place where physics, carpentry, and nerve argue in the dust. The castle's advantage is that it pre-writes the arguments. Angles set months ago, stakes cut last winter, carts with wheels already chocked, water staged, quicklime lidded and ready. When the stone falls, the plan stands. If the camp outside can't break the funnel, if the inner lines hold and the counterpunches keep turning surges into clogs, something predictable happens. The engines slow, the shouting fades to hoarse orders, the ladders come less often, and the night fires in the field draw closer together as men sit nearer for warmth. That's the siege approaching its last chapter. Not the heroic one on a tapestry, the practical one where the army that arrived like thunder leaves like a cart that used to have a wheel. Every siege we've walked through hums with rope, wood, stone and muscle. Then gunpowder enters the chat and changes the key. Not overnight, not with a single cannon blast that sends castles into retirement, but steadily, like a new season pushing the old one out of the garden. The question isn't, did castles die? It's how did they adapt and what did they leave in our bones? First, the bang. Early bombards were crude, short iron throats belching stones that shattered themselves as often as walls. They were terrifying more than precise. But by the late 15th century, cannons grew longer, barrels stronger, and iron shot replaced stone. A solid iron ball doesn't smash, it punches. The old vertical walls, tall, proud, beautifully miserable against rams and ladders, suddenly presented perfect targets. A cannon doesn't care about a talus, it cares about leverage and repetitive stress. Hit near the base, again and again, and the whole face slumps like a bookshelf missing a screw. Castles didn't throw up their hands. They thickened and lowered their profiles. Squat, heavy curtains backed with packed earth to drink the shock. Gun ports cut into bastions so defenders could reply with their own artillery. The vocabulary shifted from tower to bastion, from crenel to embrasure. But the idea angles, overlapping fire, kill lanes stayed stubborn. Walk the later great fortresses, and you'll sense the lineage. Corners sharpened into arrowhead bastions, moats widened and dry to stop escalade and give cannons clear shots. Covered ways and ravelins pushed the fight outward into a chessboard of ditches and slopes. It's still a castle's brain inside a gunpowder body. The Trace Italienne star forts became the crown of this adaptation. Low, thick, geometry-drunk masterpieces, they made life miserable for cannon crews and gave defenders artillery platforms that raked every approach. You don't assault a star fort the way you rush a gatehouse. You siege it with engineers and months of trench work, creeping saps in zigzags to avoid enfilade fire, earth thrown up into parallels that inch forward by the shovel. If medieval castles turned time into a weapon, gunpowder forts turned math into one angles that deny blind spots. Distances measured in effective ranges, a landscape drawn with a protractor. And yet, as national armies grew and kings learned to pay for standing forces and artillery trains, the logic shifted again. War stopped being a dance of private strongholds and became a roadshow of state campaigns. You can build a star fort, you cannot build one around every village. And the new economy of violence said, march fast, strike supply, starve cities, decide battles in fields. Castles, stone machineries of local power, became less about breaking armies and more about anchoring administration. Many mutated into palaces with manors, keeps softened into halls with big windows, arrow loops widened into views, moats gleamed for swans as much as for spears. Courtesy replaced killing as the headline use case. Even then, the defensive DNA didn't vanish. Posterns became garden doors. Sallyports became private side gates. Keeps held archives instead of last stands. When revolts or invasions flared, those softened castles still managed to be hard enough to swallow a rough week until help arrived. More importantly, they kept broadcasting the old message. Height says, "We see you." Stone says, "We endure." Power loves both sentences. What does the castle teach that a glass tower or a server farm should hear? 3 big lessons. Lesson 1. Terrain is a decision, not a backdrop. Medieval builders understood that the first line of defense is the ground you choose. Put your data center on a floodplain and you're reenacting a bad moat. Build your hospital access down a single narrow road, and you've made a gatehouse for ambulances in the worst sense. The smart siting of Edinburgh, the water logic of Bodiam, the cliff-minded stubbornness of coastal forts. These are design reviews that never went out of date. The modern version is zoning, redundancy of access, and climate maps pinned to the first page of the plan, not the last. Lesson 2. Layers beat heroes. Concentric walls, inner yards, fallback lines, hedgehogs behind breaches. This is redundancy as culture. No single wall saves you, the stack does. Translate it to now. Firewalls plus zero trust plus off-site backups. Evacuation routes plus sprinklers plus compartmentalized floors. A castle's genius is not a single trick. It's the refusal to let any single failure become a catastrophe. Lesson 3. Logistics are tactics. The best killing lanes mean nothing if your arrows run out. The slickest breach plan dies if your buckets are empty. In modern work, that's staffing, training and supply. Not glamorous, utterly decisive. Castles turned chores into strategy. Ration boards as morale levers. Maintenance as weapon readiness. The baker as important as the banner. Replace baker with SRE, nurse manager, or quartermaster, and the sentence reads the same. We should talk psychology too, because castles perfected mind games centuries before psyops got a name. The smell of roasting meat on the wind, helmets on poles, false gates, lamps that walked the wall in suggestive numbers. Today's equivalents, status pages. Canary deploys you let be seen. Quiet confidence instead of panicked emails play the same long game. Your opponent, or your customer base, doesn't just read what you say, they read your posture. Castles were posture sculptures in stone. So did gunpowder win. It forced a pivot. The old tall and proud skyline became low and lethal. Then, when mobility, money and politics outran brick and lime, castles ceded the battlefield but kept the real estate of symbolism. Their afterlives are instructive. Some crumbled into romance ivy on ashlar, sheep nosing in dry moats, tourists with ice creams where arrows once hummed. Others became government buildings, museums, schools, even prisons. In every role, the core idea lingers. Protect what matters with layers, make entrances behave, let height watch, stock the pantry. There's also the uncomfortable chapter. Castles as instruments of control. They weren't just shelters against invaders. They were statements to the countryside. Tax lives here. Law lives here. The Lord lives above. That dual nature is honest. Fortification is never neutral. It protects one thing by dominating another. Remembering that makes our admiration sharper and our planning humbler. What about the human texture, the sounds we'd hear if we could put a microphone to a wall and listen to centuries at once? Bootsteps on spiral stairs, wind through crenels, the clack of a portcullis pall, a child's laugh in a yard turned barracks, turned market square, a mason humming while he repoints a seam that frost unzipped in January, a drum in smoke at a breach, a horn at midnight. Then, later, the soft nuisance of pigeons and the multilingual murmur of visitors reading placards where garrisons once read ration boards. The building changes jobs. The acoustics keep their memory. Here's the last quiet gift castles hand us. A way to think about pressure. Every system you care about is a fortress of sorts. Your family budget, a hospital on a hot night, a power grid in a storm, a code base under strain. Ask the castle's questions and you'll design better. Where's the high ground? What's the moat literal or procedural that slows a bad day? Where are the gatehouses' interfaces that must be welcoming and safe? What are the hidden ways, maintenance channels, emergency exits, backfills that let you move without being seen? What's your ration board, a transparent plan that turns fear into chores? What's your breach plan, a funnel ready to buy you an hour when something gives? The stone machines on headlands and hillsides don't answer back, but they nod if you look long enough. They're not relics, they're prototypes. We don't throw rocks from their crowns anymore. Please don't. And our enemies aren't usually intense beyond the ditch. But gravity still works, and time still punishes. And courage still needs a schedule. Build with that in mind, and you're in a long, competent conversation with people who learnt those rules by living and, often, dying with them. So, did a bunch of stone walls really hold off whole armies? Yes, because they were never just walls. They were choices. Stacked and rehearsed, ground that fought, doors that lied, heights that listened, rooms that remembered what to do when struck. Gunpowder changed the costumes. It didn't erase the script. And if you stand today on a battlement, wind in your face, country unrolling in green and road, you can still feel the plan under your boots. Not just to survive, but to outlast.